Hello there, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today on the Sage 50 Payroll Pensions module. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and we are joined today by my colleagues Calvin, Lee, and Matt, who are all standing by in the background, ready to answer any questions. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start with a brief introduction, so a short history of automatic enrolment and what your employer duties are. And we're then going to go into the main features of the Sage 50 Payroll Pensions module. So this will include the pension assessment, where we're going to look at how your staff are assessed and how you can process opt-in, opt-out and postponement. We're going to discuss send pension data and the various different ways you can do that depending on who your provider is. And we're also going to look at the send pension correspondence option, which is where you can print and email letters for your employees and keep records of what communications have been sent and when. I will run through the further support available at the end of the session, and we'll stick around for questions. So we're aiming to complete the presentation within about half an hour, and we'll stick around after that for the questions at the end. So let's crack on with the introduction. And the first thing I'm going to do is a bit of a reminder for some of you, I'm sure. We're going to run through the automatic enrolment duties. So there are certain duties that all employers have by law, taking effect either from your staging date or since 2017, the date you took on your first employee. And the initial duties that you had were to choose a qualifying pension scheme, work out which of your staff need to go into that pension, put them into the pension and then write to your staff, and then declare your compliance by registering with the pensions regulator. And I would imagine that everyone here has completed those initial duties, unless perhaps you're a brand new employer taking on your first staff, and this is what you would start out by doing. However, following that staging or duty start date, you do have a set of ongoing duties. You can read more about these on the pensions regulator website. So they include monitoring the age and earnings of your staff, and when they meet the criteria to be auto-enrolled, put them into the pension. Maintain pension contributions, so there's an employee contribution to deduct and an employer contribution you need to make yourself. Manage requests to join or leave the scheme, known as opting in or opting out. Keeping records, and every 3 years, there is a re-enrollment duty, which we're actually going to cover in a separate webinar in a couple of weeks' time. So do get yourself signed up for our re-enrollment and redeclaration webinar if you'd like to learn more about that. Now, to make dealing with these duties easier, we designed the pensions module, which is an add-on to Sage 50 Payroll. So you can take out a separate subscription for the pensions module, which will activate these features. It's designed to eliminate the admin burden of auto-enrollment, and the three main areas that we're going to focus on today are the pension assessment, the send pension data options, and send pension correspondence. Now, if you don't currently use the pensions module and you're considering taking this out, you will need to set it up. And we do have some steps on how to do so in our help center. So if you haven't yet set up and you're needing help and guidance on that, please do follow the link available on this slide in the handout. So we're going to go into some demonstrations next. And the first thing I want to show you is the pension assessment option. Now, the main task here is identifying eligible staff and ensuring that they are assigned a qualifying pension scheme. But it is also used to process opt-in and opt-out requests, including refunds for employees that opt out within a month of enrolment. And it can be used to apply postponement, which can be used for new starters, employees who have a pay spike, or the first time an employee becomes eligible. So we're going to try and show you all of those different things in the demo. So I'm just going to bring the slide down at this point. And first thing, before we go into that assessment, I'm going to show you is the pensions module settings. So I've already been through the setup for this demo, and you'll be able to find the settings by going to your company tasks and then going into pensions module settings. And what you'll find here is your original staging or duty start date. There are some re-enrollment settings, And again, that's something that we cover in our other webinar. You'll select your default auto-enrollment scheme. So that's a scheme that employees will be put into when they're assessed. But you can also set up exceptions to that scheme by organising your employees into cost centres or departments, and then adding an exception for a different scheme for members of that department or cost centre. The other thing you can configure here are postponement options, which will automatically select a postponement date when you apply postponement. So you can select dates that align to pay reference periods to avoid pro rata calculations for new starters, employees with a pay spike, or employees who turn 22. So I just wanted to show you those settings, and I'll click Save to take us back to the main payroll desktop, and we'll now take a look at the pensions module and how that fits in to your payroll process. So I'm now just going to navigate back to my payroll tasks, and if I just quickly switch on the payroll process map, I'll show you the pensions module options. So there's one here to import pension updates. So this can be used with supported pension providers to bring in any scheme changes or details of employees that have opted out. There's the pension assessment option, which you would run directly after you enter the payments. And then after you complete your payroll, you've got tasks to send pension data to your provider, review pension payments, so a report you can run, and then we have the pension correspondence option as well. So the order in which you complete these tasks are the order that they're shown in the process map and also in the payroll tasks running top to bottom. So for this demo, I'm running my February payroll, and I've already entered my employees' payments. So my next step would be to run the pension assessment. So I'm going to run from the payroll task just here. And when you go into a pension assessment, you will be prompted to take a backup. And I would strongly recommend that you do so at this point, because if you make any changes that you need to undo, sometimes it is necessary to restore a backup. So really handy to have that backup if needed. And once you've taken a backup, that then takes us into the pension assessment screen. So as you can see, it's laid out in different columns. There's a line for each employee. The type column just here shows the worker category that each employee fits into, and that's based on their age and their earnings in this pay reference period. So there are three categories. The eligible category are those employees that should be put into a pension scheme unless they've previously opted out. There's a non-eligible category, which means the employee is either too old or too young to be eligible, or they're not quite earning enough, they're not earning above the earnings trigger. And there's also an entitled category, and this is for employees that earn below the lower level of qualifying earnings, but they too still retain a right to ask to join a pension scheme. But for entitled workers, it doesn't have to be a qualifying pension scheme. So you can see the various types that each employee has been identified as. And then next to this, you see the auto-enrollment status. So you can see for my eligible employees, many of them are auto-enrolled. And if you just hover over the magnifying glass, it gives you further details on the assessment. So qualifying earnings in this case, £2,500. The employee's aged 41 and they're a UK worker. So they meet the criteria to be eligible, and actually they were auto-enrolled back in March 2019. You'll see similar for the other types. So this employee is non-eligible because they're above state pension age. So that means they don't have to be put into a scheme, but they can ask. And the entitled workers are the ones that are the lower paid, earning below the lower level of qualifying earnings. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the pension scheme details for anyone that is in the scheme. So you've got the scheme name, contribution percentage and amount, and then total contribution for the employee and total pension contributions for all employees. The total is here at the bottom. So other things you can do in the assessment screen is you can monitor for changes. So if there's a flag next to the employee name, that indicates there has been a change since the last assessment. So for example, this employee's worker category has changed. They're being automatically enrolled due to a pay spike. And a quick way to check for changes is to use the filters here at the top. So you can filter for changes this period, and you can see I have 3 in total. So another category change because an employee has turned 22. And I've got a new starter here who also meets the criteria to be auto-enrolled. So a really quick and handy way to see what's changed, to make sure you don't miss something like a 22nd birthday, which would require auto-enrollment. Now you can save a copy of the assessment by either printing it, exporting it as a CSV, or emailing it to yourself or to a colleague. And then you have some options at the top of the screen to manage the opt-in and opt-out requests, and also to manage employee postponement. So let's take a closer look at those options now. So I'm going to process an opt-in request. Now, the way that this works is an employee will need to give you a written request to join the pension scheme. And you can then add the request date into the pension assessment screen, and they will then be enrolled from the next pay reference period. So if, for example, employee 6, who is currently non-eligible, has written to me asking to be opted into the scheme, I can select them and I can choose opt-in/join. And then it's just a case of recording the opt-in date. So let's say that came in on Monday this week, and then we can choose the pension scheme that we're putting them into. Now, if they're in the non-eligible category, they will need to go into a qualifying scheme. But if they're lower paid and they're in the entitled category, you could put them into an alternative scheme where you don't have to make a pension contribution yourself. For this employee, they need to go into a qualifying scheme. So I've selected that from the drop-down. And then if I want to, if I've got any supporting documentation, you can attach it by clicking Attach File. So maybe you've scanned in the letter they've given you, got a PDF of the request or anything like that. And then to complete the request, simply click the Opt-in button. So you can see that the change has been applied. It will take effect from the relevant pay period. And if I just hover over this opt-in status, you can see that the enrolment date has been set to the 6th of March, because that is the first day of my next tax period, my next pay reference period. So the next tax month begins on the 6th of March, and that is when the opt-in will take effect. So it's slightly different to being auto-enrolled, because when you're auto-enrolled, it takes effect immediately. If you opt in, it'll take effect from the next pay reference period. So that's the opt-in process. Let's now look at opting out or leaving a scheme. Now, in terms of what an employee needs to do to opt out, this is all managed by your pension provider. So it's not as simple as them just asking you to opt out of the scheme. They will need to follow the opt-out process defined by their provider. So it could be that the provider gives them a form to fill in and hand back to you, or they might have other opt-out options, such as via an online account or by telephone, where the provider will then let you know who has opted out. Now, whichever way they have opted out, when you receive an opt-out request, you'll need to record the details. And if an employee has opted out within a month of their active membership achieved date, they will be entitled to a refund, and you'll be able to process the refund through the pension assessment. So if we just look down my list, I have an employee that was auto-enrolled last month in January. So they've had all the paperwork, they've been enrolled with the pension provider, but they've decided to opt out. So I've received the opt-out information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that employee, and this time use the opt-out/leave option. And then it's a case of recording the opt-out date. So let's say that one came in today. And if it is within the 1 month opt-out window, you'll be able to tick a box to refund the first month's contributions. And this is the employee refund amount. And you'll see when we save it, the total refund will include the employer amount as well. So like the opt-in request, you can attach any supporting documentation, but I'll just go ahead and click opt-out. If I then click OK, you can see the status now shows opt-out. It's recorded when the notice was received, and you can see here a refund for last month's contributions, employee plus employer, is now being displayed. Now, third thing I want to show you in the pension assessment is the postponement option. The way that postponement works is, as an employer, you do have a choice at the point someone becomes eligible to postpone their enrolment, and you can choose a period of up to 3 months. And it's typically used for short-term staff that you're not planning on keeping for more than 3 months. For employees with a temporary increase in their pay, known as a pay spike. So if they're usually below the earnings trigger, but they've had a one-off bonus or they've done some extra hours, which they don't usually do, you could postpone the enrolment until their pay returns to normal. And the other time you might do it is when someone turns 22, if you want to postpone to the start of a pay reference period to avoid a pro rata pension contribution. Now, recording the postponement, pretty straightforward. Again, you would select the employee you want to postpone, or if you click postpone, it'll show anyone that's eligible to be postponed. So it's actually the 3 employees that were enrolled this period. And then I can tick the one that I actually want to postpone. So I've got a new starter. So we don't know whether we're keeping them that long. So I'm going to postpone them, and I can choose any date within 3 months of the enrolment date. So I'm going for the maximum time allowed, 6th of May. And then I can go ahead and click postpone. So that change has now been applied to employee 15. You can see the status has changed to postponed. That has taken the pension scheme off of them, and at this point, there will be no contributions taken. So that is your pension assessment. If you did want to save the report, make sure you select everyone first and then use any of these output options at the bottom. I'm simply going to close out of the pension assessment, and I can then continue with the payroll process. So I will quickly show you some of the changes that have been made to the employee records. So employee that opted out, if we go to their pensions tab, they are not yet in a scheme, but it has recorded the fact that they're postponed, and that'll end on the 5th of May. So if they're still with us on the 6th of May, they'll be assessed. They'll go back into the scheme if they're still eligible. Employee who opted out, we look on the pensions tab, we can see it's put the to date in. Now that 1 month opt-out window, if you're wondering when that started, it starts with effect from the active membership date. So this is recorded in payroll at the point you generate the pension letters, which we're going to see a little bit later on in Send Pension Correspondence. And then for those that are auto-enrolled, let's look at the one that opted in. It was employee 6. You can see they have opted in. The scheme is assigned, ready for that next pay reference period. So that's the pension assessment. That's the main bit of the pensions module. But we are also going to take a quick look at sending pension data and correspondence. And by the way, if you're downloading the handout, the links that you see on this screen will take you to the relevant support article. So once you've done your pension assessment, you've produced your payroll reports and you've updated records, one of your next tasks in regards to pension is to send the pension data to your provider. And the pensions module provides 3 different ways you can do this, and the method you choose will depend mainly on who your provider is. So one option is to set up and use pensions data exchange. You can think of this as RTI, but for pension providers. It submits enrolment and contribution data directly to your provider. Also, for some providers, gives you access to import the opt-outs and scheme changes. And it's currently compatible with Nest, the People's Pension, Standard Life, and there's an early adopter scheme for smart pensions. So if you're looking for more information on setting this up, you can find it in our Pensions Data Exchange Support Hub. There is a link to that on the slide. And once you've got it set up, you'll be sending your pension data in literally a few clicks. Option number 2 is to export a CSV file using the Send Pension Data option. So if you don't have Pensions Data Exchange enabled for your subscription, you will see this option when you go into Send Pension Data. And this allows you to create a CSV file for either Nest, Now Pensions, or the People's Pension. You would then save that CSV file and upload it to your provider's portal. And then within the Send Pension Data module, you would mark the file that you've uploaded as either confirmed, if it's been accepted, or for any reason you need to generate it again, you can mark it as rejected. And again, we've got the detailed steps for these providers in this option available in our help center. And the third method for any of those providers that weren't mentioned on the previous two is that we can provide a bespoke report, which is designed to the specification of your pension provider. You would then output that report in Excel in order to create a CSV file for your provider, upload the file to the provider's portal, and it will then save you time having to key that information in manually. And to see a list of all of the pension providers we have reports available for, again, follow the link on screen. There's loads of them for this option. And if you need to get those reports, you'll find the steps on doing that in the article as well. So that's Send Pension Data. Won't be able to give you any demos on that because I don't have any kind of live accounts for Pensions Data Exchange. But do check out the Help Center for more information. But what I can show you though is the Send Pension Correspondence option. So one of your employer duties is to keep records and to write to your employees about any auto-enrollment changes that affect them. And the Send Pension Correspondence option is designed to manage that process, enabling you to either print or email pension letters, which will be the default option if you currently email the payslips. It produces general notices for employees you take on for the first time, enrolment letters for those being put into the scheme, postponement letters for employees you choose to postpone, and every 3 years, if you've got anyone that goes back into the pension scheme, you can also generate your re-enrollment letters from here. So you'll be recording the date they were sent, who the letter was sent by, and it keeps an audit trail of everything that was sent, should that ever be needed, if you get a visit from the pensions regulator, etc. So let's give you a demo on this one. So what I will need to do is to complete my payroll. So I'm going to update the records. You would then send your FPS in the usual way. The Send Pension Data option, if you have Pensions Data Exchange, or you're creating CSV files for Nest, People's Pension, or Now Pensions, is just here. And then just underneath, you can run a report, which will show you the pension payments due to your provider. So if I click onto this now, you'll see it comes up with the report criteria. So I'll just run the report for the month of February. And then you'll see, go straight to your printer. So it won't give a preview first. However, here's one I prepared earlier. Schedule of payments report looks something like this. It breaks down the contributions along with the total amount that you'll be due to pay to each provider. Then our final task is send in pension correspondence. There won't always be correspondence to send, by the way. It's usually if there's been any changes. But if we go into that option now, and you'll see in this instance, we have 5 letters that we need to send. So there are 3 job holder letters for employees going into the pension scheme, and you can actually preview the letter if you want to see it before you print it or email it. So this is what a job holder letter looks like. It tells you the duty start date, the date that the employee is being put into the scheme provider, and then illustrations of minimum pension contributions. Also informs them about the right to opt out. And then some further information and some FAQs. So these are based on the template letters that were published on the pension regulator's website. General notice is produced for any new starter that you take on, regardless of whether they're being enrolled or not. So it just tells them about the legislation, what the criteria is to be enrolled. And we also have a postponement letter because we apply postponement for that new starter. We've got a letter explaining that they met the criteria, they're not going to the scheme right now, but if they're still eligible on the postponement date, that is when they will be enrolled. So at the end of each pay run, you can see what letters are pending. I'm going to select them all, so I want to produce them all, and then we can record the date on which the letter is sent. So these are going to be sent on pay date. And for these job holder letters, for people going into the scheme, this is the date that will be used as the active membership date. So that's when the 1 month opt-out window begins. The sent by option can be either provider or user. So if your pension provider does all the communications on your behalf, you can select provider and simply show the letters as sent so that you've got your record keeping done. You don't actually have to send out letters. But if you're doing the letters yourself, as I am, you would choose user, and then you would click on the send option. So all of mine are going to go to the printer, but if I had set any of these employees up to receive email payslips, the format would be email. So we can override it to print them all if we want to. I mean, these are all going to be printed anyway. And if I click on to send, then comes up with my printer dialog. So this is the general notice. These are the job holder letters, 12 pages of them. And then finally, I have my postponement letter. And that is the letters produced. So it also saves a copy in the Documents tab on the employee record, but you can view an audit trail of letters sent just by selecting the historical options just here. So that's send pension correspondence, one of your last tasks in the pay run. And that actually brings us to the end of this short demo. So quick recap on send pension correspondence. You can print or email the pension letters. You can produce different types of letters depending if it's a new starter, someone going into the scheme, or someone being postponed. And then you've got that audit trail of all letters sent. So let's just finish off with a recap of the auto enrolment duties we talked about at the start of the session. Just tie these back to the pensions module. So monitoring the age and earnings of your staff is something that is taken care of by the pension assessment. And we saw that we had 22-year-old that we might have missed if we were doing that manually that went into the pension scheme. Maintain the contributions. You can see that within the pension assessment. It's part of the data that you send to your pension provider, the contribution data. So we've got tools to take care of that as well. Manage requests to join or leave your scheme is all done in the pension assessment. You've seen the opt-in and opt-out requests as well as refunds. Pensions module is all about keeping records. So that's being ticked off as well. And although we haven't got time to show you today, there is re-enrollment built into the module as well. So you'll be able to complete your re-enrollment duties with a pension assessment, and you can learn more about that if you come to our re-enrollment webinar. And if you did want to read more around the duties themselves, Pensions Regulator website is the best place to go. So that's it for the presentation, but as promised, we are going to stick around because I've seen quite a few questions come in, so we'll try and get as many of those answered as possible over the next 10 minutes or so. I'd just like to let you know about the further support that's available. So starting with our online help centre, all of the links in the handout will generally direct you to our help centre that you can access at sage.co.uk/help. You can either search our knowledge base using keywords, or you could go to the workplace pensions area to read our support guides. You can access the upcoming webinars as well as webinar recordings if you click on the webinars option, which is found towards the top of the help centre, as I'm just highlighting here. And in our support guides, you'll find various videos as well as the best way to get in touch with our support team with the particular query that you have. So that could be web chat, could be by phone, or it could be various other methods. So that's our help centre. Do check it out if you haven't already done so. I'd also like to briefly explain what else is included to you as a Sage customer and therefore a Sage member. So this is all in the handout, so you can read through some of these slides. But I'll just call out the member benefits that you get. So our member masterclasses are available online. It's a series of videos from business experts. We're up to series 3 now, so you can check those out following the link on screen. You get free access to Sage University at sageu.com. That includes our certification courses as well, so do check those out. Sage City is our community forum, as well as your award-winning support and business advice. So all of that included as a Sage member. So have a read through that if you want to know more. So as promised, we are going to stick around for a little while to continue answering questions. We may not get around to every single one, but do keep an eye on the Q&A section because we tend to reply to all. So you will see questions that have been asked and the answers that have come through. Get a copy of the handouts if you want them now from the download section, from that documents icon. And if you are leaving the webinar right now, I just want to thank you for your time today. I hope you found that quick tour of the pensions module useful, whether you're using it now or not. And do look out for a follow-up email that we'll be sending you in about an hour's time with a recording of the session today, as well as a link to our webinar survey. So I'm going to help the guys out with the questions. I'm going to go on to mute in a moment, but I will be back with you when we are ready to close the webinar down. So I'll speak to you soon. Okay, so it looks like most of the questions that were sent through have now been answered. So thank you so much for sending them through, and thanks to the guys behind the scenes answering them. Looks like there's just maybe 1 or 2 left to send through, so we are going to start to wrap things up. Thank you once again for joining us today at the webinar. This is our regular slot, 2 p.m. on a Thursday, so do check out what else we're running moving forward. March is dedicated to payroll year end. So we have a number of different dates and times for our 2 payroll year-end webinars that you can sign up to, one around preparing for year-end and the other one on processing year-end and starting the new tax year. You will receive a follow-up email which has a link to our upcoming webinars. So do check that out if you want to sign up to any further sessions. Could I also ask if you could just take a moment to complete the short survey as you leave? All of your feedback is valuable to us and it helps us to make sure that these webinars are hitting the mark and improve them for yourselves. So with that said, I think we've pretty much finished the questions now, so we're going to wrap things up. Thank you once again for joining us. We hope to see you at some other sessions soon. Goodbye for now.